President Cyril Ramaphosa is going through arguably the worst time of his reign. With me is independent governance expert Richard Chelin. Welcome, Richard.
Thank you for having me, Chris. It's a pleasure to be here.
President Ramaphosa's nephew, by marriage, has now forfeited permanently 326 million rands worth of assets linked to the looting of Tembisa Hospital, but he is still free.
Yes, thanks, Chris. Yeah, it's quite it's quite something, I would say, in the spate of things that's been happening. But just to give a brief context of the background of the whole asset forfeiture thing, I think the viewers would remember around Tembisa Hospital, where I think the famous name Babita Deokaran, who blew the whistle, and she was assassinated on August 23, 2021. And it's been a long time. I mean, the wheel of justice have been turning slowly. They've arrested, the killers, but now we're starting to see some of the fruits that are coming out of her whistleblowing, which indicates the importance of whistleblowers in the context of fighting corruption. In the context of specifically Maumela's asset forfeiture, I would say it goes back to August 2025, when the NPA Asset Forfeiture Unit obtained a preservation order, meaning preliminary preservation order for freezing his assets. And yesterday, the Johannesburg High Court has finally granted that final forfeiture order. And it's quite a big amount. I mean, 326 million. And however, I would just like to stress as well that Maumela was not the only person, that was allegedly fingered within this whole Tembisa looting. There are other individuals which we hopefully will see the wheel of justice also turning for them.
From the president's relative to his possible impeachment, he is fighting through the courts to stay off that hearing. What impact would his impeachment, were it to happen, have on the government of national unity, Richard?
I think, let's see if we track back, right? We've seen 2024 elections was quite a historic one in the sense that, we've seen the ANC lose its outright majority. There was this kind of euphoria where everybody, was kind of had this expectancy that things will, greatly improve from over the past years. We've seen state capture. Then we've seen the coalition coming together, government of national unity, while others would claim they are coalition. The term differs from party to party, but we've seen this kind of renewal that we were expecting. But I think 2 years on, when we look at the key performance indicators, if I may quote some of the figures, we've seen, I think the euphoria has actually died down a bit. GDP growth is, well below the 3% target that the government of national unity, identified that they will do that. They will reach a 3% target of annual GDP growth. We haven't seen that happening. We've seen expanded rates in unemployment from 42.6 to 43.7% in the first quarter of 2026. But also we've seen some, some benefits, like we've seen the economic stability, for instance, right? We've seen the rand doing quite well. We've seen SARS have collected, 114 billion rand more than the previous year. But when the economy might look great, but at the end of the day, what does it mean for ordinary citizens? It hasn't trickled down, right? And employment is still high. And politically, we've also seen there have been some crises ongoing, right? We've seen when President Ramaphosa sacked the deputy trade minister, for instance, there were some fractures starting to show within the GNU. But overall, they seem to kind of manage, each other and come back together and continue forward. But I think the impeachment's going to have, if it goes through and the president is found, in breach of his duties and he will have to step down or impeach, I think we will see some great fractures, coming out to the fore now. because we have to remember that there are very typical political factions that we see, right? Some within the ANC themselves, within under the ruling party, are willing to work with other parties besides the DA. And I would say it's going to be quite a tough time.
So the Democratic Alliance would have to work with probably Vice President Paul Mashatile, whom they wanted behind bars before the election.
Yeah, there are, there are allegations that have been raised. There are investigations ongoing, and also we've seen that from the various speeches and rhetorics that the deputy president is keen to work with other political parties, wanting, with the likes of the EFF or the MK party, has come out. So it's going to be quite a difficult time. And the Democratic Alliance have come out, and I think that was when the election happened, right? They said no. President Ramaphosa is the only candidate that we are willing to work with within the ANC. But we've seen this is politics, Chris. Things change, people views change, perception change, and I would say, being in cabinet, being a minister, being in the executive, really, can change your perceptions at time. So it would really be interesting to see what goes down, and I'm sure that there are talks behind the scenes. They are definitely talking. What they're saying, we are not too sure yet, but in time will tell.
Meanwhile, civil society still has to run to the courts to fight unjust laws and to enforce governance,
No,
proper
definitely,
governance.
definitely. I would say, it's we have a well documented reputation as a litigious society, and I would say it's not accidental. I think just for the benefit of the viewers, it's important to look at two historical currents. We've seen the ANC origins in legal activism. Many ANC were trained as human rights lawyers, and then we've also seen the country's adoption of an advanced constitutional democracy in 1996, right? But the challenge is, there are some commentators, analysts that argue that the ANC has normalized the pattern of delegating, delaying, rather than driving decisive governance. I think that's something that comes up. Be more decisive in governing and making decisions. And I think it has been left to the judiciary and civil society to be the real engines of social change. They are the one that take action. I think you would remember the HIV/AIDS ARV kind of saga when it was through civil society that there was a judicial intervention, through the Treatment Action Campaign, landmark constitutional victory. And as we go along, we've seen during the state capture era as well, we've seen a lot of litigation being perceived as an accountability tool. And civil society should be commended for this. Where you find political will falters, where the government is not coming through, civil society stands up and rebuild that. And I would remember someone once said, civil society goes to court not because they want to, but because Parliament and the executive have left them with no other mechanism to enforce accountability. And in that sense, the courts have become the last line of defense for constitutional democracy.
Mm. There are people who feel that to a big extent South Africa is being run through the courts. But then we also have political parties with their infighting and inter-party fighting, clogging up an already overburdened justice system.
No, definitely, definitely. And year in, year out, when you read the report of the Office of the Chief Justice, you will see the, less resources, but more cases coming through. I think a couple of months ago, there was a story that came out that I think, was it in Gauteng, where the courts are overburdened, where you go now to get a court case will be in 3, 4 years' time, 5 years' time, and the delay of justice. And like you rightly say, in addition to, those various litigation, the various cases, coming through, it's also a political battle being fought, in the courts. For instance, application filed at the Constitutional Court have more than tripled since 2010. We're talking there about 400, close to 400 annually, and it's become quite overburdening. And also, the courts, as I previously mentioned, have become the last line of defense. I think also we have to look at why cases are being, delayed, and the backlog as well is we have what we call, I think with most all South Africans are familiar with the Stalingrad tactics, where lawyers should just keep on delaying cases for their clients to stay out of the courts, right? And these really, really clogged up the system. And the backlog that I previously mentioned, it keeps on growing. And it's quite ironical. There's quite a sad irony here because, we ask civil society to go to court to hold those power to account. But then when you have these same political actors who weaponize the courts with their delaying tactics, and then you have the judiciary, on the other hand, stretched to breaking point. So you really have a very fragile system that's, I would say, being strangled from both sides.
Healthcare matters, but what matters most?
Having cover for the people who keep this business going.
Bonitas is there for you when it counts. Bonitas, medical aid for South Africa. Visit bonitas.co.za and find your plan.
Now, South Africans have become quite used to the big gap between the findings of commissions and enforcement of recommendations. But the Madlanga Commission of Inquiry does seem different. We have seen a spate of arrests while the commission is still sitting, while people are still waiting for those fingered at the Zondo Commission to be arrested. What makes this commission so much more effective?
I would say, rightly so. I would say personally myself, when I heard another commission was being set up, I really, felt, oh, another one. There we go. If I can count on the commissions that took place, right? From the Arms Deal Commission to the Zondo Commission. I think the Zondo Commission was the big one. Over 1 billion rand spent, um, and with very little, hardly any cases, I would say, one going to court, two those that went to court uh, kind of failed, right? And also I would say, because I've done some work on the Zondo commissions and the research around that, you would find very often, the prosecutors would say, the Zondo commission does not provide evidence that can be prosecuted. You still need to take these evidence that people got from the Zondo Commission and investigate it, which is a long process. But I think, as you rightly mentioned, Madlanga Commission has changed that. I think they changed the way the commission should run. We have 3 commissioners. We have very great evidence leaders, and we have, I think, most underspoken of is the Madlanga task team that works besides, alongside the commission. And, I think for the first time we've seen arrests being perpetrated. Um, but being the pessimist that most of us are, or myself, you would say, okay, that's great. You're having arrests, you're having court cases, but are we going to finally see, successful prosecution? Are we going to see convictions? And I think that's what most of us are waiting for. But having said that, I would say that the Madlanga Commission is to be commended. I think it's the structure that they fed in, that while the commission is ongoing, there are evidence being put through to the task team, investigation is ongoing, and arrests are being made. So it creates a positive perception that work is being done and that the commission was not set up to be another commission with massive reports, but no accountability at the end.
Some people have, however, expressed disappointment with the draft report of Parliament's ad hoc committee. What powers do parliamentary committees actually have? Do they have teeth?
Well, you went straight to the point. I was going to give a brief background around parliamentary committee, and I will touch on that. I think, parliamentary committees are constitutionally mandated to exercise oversight over the executive, right? So I think that's one of the strengths or the design behind the parliamentary committees to hold the government or the various departments to account, up to ministerial level and the departments, right? But however, we've seen that in the history, this has failed to happen consistently. We go back to the Zondo Commission verdict. Justice Zondo came out and said, Parliament failed in its constitutional role to oversee and hold the executive accountable during the state capture era. We've seen Constitutional Court in 2011, that declared that Parliament failed in its constitutional duty when it rushed an opaque process for key appointments. I think the quite famous Glenister case. We've seen the Thabo Bester inquiry. I think most people haven't heard of it, right? But there was a Correctional Service Portfolio Committee meeting, We haven't heard anything. PRASA failed for 6 years to implement binding remedial action from the public protector, and the Parliament failed to compel compliance. And I would say, SOEs, if you go back before the Zondo Commission, you go to the parliamentary committees and you look at evidence that, individual provided, whistleblowers, on the failure of SOEs during the state capture era, and very little came out of it, And most recently, I would say, prior to Lieutenant General Mkhwenazi coming out, the March of that year, he was in Parliament. He was in the Portfolio Committee for Police, and he gave the exact same presentation he did to the nation. Nothing happened. And I think, going back now to why are these structures weak, I would say there's no real mechanism to sanction ministers. Parliament, these committees have no real method of holding inept or dysfunctional ministers to account. The other aspect is we find that, ministers routinely fail to attend committee meetings. You have one minister who attended only 4 out of 36 committee meetings, 11% attendance rate. We've seen late submissions, parliamentary, the state departments not submitting the report on time. Also, we've seen something else is time and resources. MPs would say that they don't have enough time and resources and funds to conduct research, proper research that is required by the various committees. And also we've seen in the research that there are skill deficiencies, research skills skills and knowledge among committee members, and also alongside political disagreements and inefficiencies, right? We've seen that coming. But I think one thing that we can see, if we go back to the ad hoc committee on General Mkhwenazi's allegations, we've seen some of the questions were not geared towards uncovering the truth, but they were more towards party line, right? We've seen political posturing. MPs are more interested in scoring points than conducting serious oversight. And I would say that's key challenge. And like you mentioned, parliamentary committees do not have teeth to actually address some of those accountability challenges.
Lastly, Richard, how would you encapsulate the state of governance in South Africa currently?
Currently, I would say we have our challenges, right? In some aspects, we've seen some very good things coming through, right? We earlier in this conversation, we spoke about the state of the GNU. We said, there are some positives and then some negatives, right? We've seen that. For instance, we talk about parliamentary committee accountability. We've seen in the Committee for Higher Education, where one minister was pointed out and then she was eventually sacked and replaced. That's a positive. That's a functional democracy. On the other hand, you have the high unemployment level. We've seen, unemployment, infrastructure challenges. So I would say it's ups and downs, and it depends on who you speak to. If you speak to businesses, they would highly likely say it's going in the right direction. There's still a lot of work to be done. If you speak to the ordinary citizen, they will say, we're not seeing any benefit, we don't have jobs. Food prices are going up, and also given the global context at this point in time also impact on it. And we've seen most recently, I would say from the criminal justice, we've seen the Madlanga Commission, we've seen arrests, we've seen now the NPA coming out, the asset forfeiture. So I would say it's a mixture. Not where it should be, but there's definitely a lot of room for improvement. But with things, let's hope that there is hope. I think even with us, with South Africa, we have hope. That's the one thing that goes for us. We always have hope that things will get better, even though, we do have some pessimistic approach. But I would say it's a balanced state, but there is still a lot of work to be done. There are some very important individuals in doing the work, pushing it up there. We've seen it in the criminal justice sector. We've seen it in Parliament. The other thing is about the GNU as well. We've seen that while there's this broad talk around government of national unity, but when one department does well, it's the political party that comes out and takes the credit for it instead of the whole, government itself. So I think there should be some more cohesive and everybody on the same plan. But with what the future awaits, we have no idea. But I would say there's still a lot of work to be done.
Thank you. That was independent governance expert Richard Chelin speaking to Biz News. I'm Chris Steyn. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Start your day a step ahead. Biz News Insider. It delivers the business stories that matter every morning straight to your inbox, sharp, fast, and free. Subscribe now. In uncertain times, good information is priceless. The Biz News Conference is heading back to the Drakensberg. Join me, Alec Hogg, from the 11th to the 14th of August for BNC 9, Champagne Sports Resort, where it all began, and where our community gathers for honest conversations, smart investing insights, and direct access to some of South Africa's sharpest minds. Come and rub shoulders with the best we've got. 28 keynote speakers, 3 days. Seats are available now. Book your seat by clicking the link in the description.